Hello, classmates and friends. My name is Carrie Adlin, and I'll be speaking today about something close to my heart. It has to do with U.S. policy in Latin America, and specifically one piece of that called the School of the Americas that needs to be shut down. I first got interested in Latin American politics when I went to Guatemala to visit a girl I had sponsored. This was back in 1980. And I had expected to go to Guatemala, visit her village, and when I landed at the airport in Guatemala, I called the office. And they said, oh no, it's too dangerous to go out to her village. And in fact, it's too dangerous to be talking on the phone, come to the office. When I did go to the office, they did have the girl there. I was able to meet her. But she was very sad because her father had been disappeared the week before and probably wasn't coming back, and also the violence in her village. So being alarmed by what she's living through and what was going on in the country, I read more about Guatemala politics. And basically, Guatemala, since it was conquered by the Spanish, has been governed by Spanish heritage Guatemalans, even though there's a larger indigenous population in Guatemala. In the 1950s in Guatemala, they had a president that was elected and started land reform. And this didn't set well with United Fruit Company, a U.S. company that was making lots of money in Guatemala. John Foster Dulles was one of the owners of United Fruit, also Attorney General, and so the CIA staged a coup in Guatemala and took out the land reform president and put in a president that would protect American interests. There was continuing struggle between the rulers and the indigenous peasants, and sometimes their indigenous formed guerrilla groups, and there was violence. But by the end of the 1970s and early 80s, the Guatemala repressive government was practically just waging war against these outlying indigenous villages. During this time also, some high-profile things were happening which showed this terror in Latin America, including Guatemala. In El Salvador, a priest or archbishop who had been going out to the villages and ministering to the poor and was celebrating Mass out in the villages, and he was actually shot during Mass and killed. So he's become a martyr. A woman in Guatemala, Rigoberta Menchú, indigenous woman, wrote a book about what her village had suffered, the torture and the disappearances, kidnappings. And eventually, Rigoberta Menchú, for her book, for her actions, won a Nobel Peace Prize. And some of the groups that were down there helping in Guatemala, say Jesuit priests, a lot of them were tortured and killed, even a nun. So there was attention onto what was happening in Guatemala and other countries. And in the United States, a group found that the people responsible for the violence and the repression were actually trained at something called the School of the Americas, which is a U.S. military school. And what they would do was invite people from the military and police from Latin American countries and come up and train them. And often, or part of their curriculum, was to keep their own people in check. And this was through all kinds of human rights violations of the torture and the kidnapping and the disappearances. So a group formed called Watch tried to shut down the School of the Americas and to give dignity to the people in Latin America who were being affected by students of this school. And some of the things they did, they hold, and still do, hold an annual vigil outside of the military base where the School of the Americas is. And during that vigil, they read names, give dignity to the people that are killed, read their names, say presente, and give them a voice. Some people, during the vigil, cross into the Army base where they're not allowed and actually get arrested as a form of civil disobedience. And this, it brings urgent attention to the need to shut down the School of the Americas. And as far as shutting it down, that's a vote in the U.S. Congress. And legislation, the Watch has organized people to influence there being legislation in the U.S. Congress to shut down the School of the Americas. In the late 1990s, when all this attention was happening, the congressional vote to shut down the school lost by only 12 votes. And at this time of high exposure, the School of the Americas actually was shut down by the Department of Defense. However, this didn't necessarily turn out to be a good thing. They opened it again with a new name, WinSec, but with the same curriculum, the same teachers, the same students. And so basically what happened is they shut down the School of the Americas, but there was no investigation, total impunity, and open it again under a name, WinSec. So what's happening now, there's another legislation. I don't know what will be voted on, but, to influence people to please tell their congressman to shut the school down. And another thing is happening. Some of the countries in Latin America that have historically sent their students to the School of the America are actually deciding to not send any more students. And there's about 6 countries, I think, that have decided that. So that's a big victory for shutting down the School of the Americas. So as far as what I'm asking you to do, to become aware of this situation and visit the website soaw.org of the Watch, and you can learn more. You can see what the legislation is happening, how other countries have responded to the School of the Americas, what action you might be able to take. Good for building awareness. See the film Romero, starring Raul Julia. Read Rigoberta Menchú, the Nobel Peace winner. Read her book. Basically, the School of the Americas is to protect American interests, but there are many unintended consequences to the people who live in the Latin American country, and that's just not acceptable. That these people who we know, many of them, and have names and have lives, that they are suffering because of this method of protecting American interests. The U.S. wants to be on the forefront of human rights, not where we're encouraging or offering training in human rights, and that's important for America's reputation and their standing with neighbors around the world. The Watch group is completely nonviolent, believe in peace, and most of the solutions that we would like to see are based on economy and an attitude of peace, because after all, in the U.S. and around the world, peace is patriotic. Thank you.